Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world with self-care strategies from Chinese medicine. I'm your host, Brody Welch, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Brody Welch, and my guest today is holistic nutrition coach Magdalena Wszelaki. She knows the value of cooking for hormone balance firsthand, having developed hyperthyroidism, hashimotos, adrenal fatigue, and estrogen dominance, which propelled her to leave a high-pressured advertising career and develop a new way of eating to repair and keep her hormones working smoothly. She has written a book on cooking for hormone balance, and she draws on current research to explain the essential role that food plays in keeping hormones in harmony and offers easy and flavorful recipes to help us eat our way to good health. Magdalena Wszelaki, welcome to A Healthy Curiosity. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'd love for you to share a little bit about your personal story. You obviously made quite a transition in life and had some pretty powerful catalysts for doing so. Love to hear about what that looked like for you.
You know, we often talk about our stuff like from the time we got diagnosed and when hormones went out of balance. But the reality of things is that hormones don't go out of balance, within a month or 3 months of doing something silly. It's a result of years of things that we just do or things that we were born with, right? And in my case, it really started off with the fact that I was not a breastfed baby. My mom bought into the 1970s idea that powdered milk was more nutritious than mother's milk. And right from get-go, I had so many gut issues and ended up with a pneumonia already in the first month. And pumped with antibiotics. And on top of that, not being breastfed, right? So, my gut was pretty messed up right from the beginning. And I had huge food sensitivities, which I now know that's what it was. But it was manifesting in a form of constant eczema, ear infections, sinus infections. I don't remember much as a 5-year-old, but I do remember being taken to the hospital to get drainage done on my ears because there was so much pus in them. And, now I know this was all due to dairy, gluten, egg sensitivities that I had, which later, as I kept eating them because I had no idea, right? These manifested and they evolved to different symptoms. Like as a young adult, I was covered in cystic acne on my face, on my butt, on my back, on my front, horrendous PMSs. I mean, you're talking about being in a fetal position for a day on the day of the period, swollen, swelling and water retention everywhere around my limbs. And then started going into kind of a crazy space of having thyroid issues where I was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism in my late 20s. And I'm pretty sure it was all because of all the digestive issues I had constantly going on. Just to give you an example, for instance, I always looked as if I was 4 months pregnant after having a latte or a bowl of pasta, right? I had no idea. I felt that there was something was wrong, but I didn't really know that was not a cool thing to stop doing or asking a question, what is going on, right? I just thought, like, okay, I'm just a little bloated, that's just how it is. Then you open up your zipper, So, and really, I think the turning point came for me in 2008 when I was finally diagnosed with hashimotos. So as often it happens, I probably had Graves in my late 20s, I was just given a meta blocker on the thyroid and call it cured, and obviously never took care of the autoimmune element of the condition, which, I most clearly had. And it's only in 2008 that I was diagnosed really quickly. And so that was the lucky thing, right? Because so many women get so undiagnosed with thyroid conditions. When I was 36 at that time. And I remember going to the doc saying to her, I'm feeling really fatigued. Like, I just can't get out of bed. And she turned my file and she looked at it and she says, you're 36 years old. Of course you're tired. So and I thought that was nonsense. That just can't be. And also being a semi-professional athlete and working in advertising. So I was in a regional job, traveling, being on the airplanes every week. I was in a different country or city. And that was very, to my friends, all of that was very sexy and it was a great career progression and trajectory. But in terms of my health, the truth was that I was the girl on a Sunday night flying out somewhere, working on my PowerPoint slides to present on Monday. I was the one eating from I was living off hotel foods and airplane air and radiation and, crappy food, right? And so no wonder in 2008, everything just collapsed. And I started having anxiety attacks, which I have never had in my life, started slipping into depression, getting really like getting really, really dark places, which it was scary because if you've never had depression in your life, suddenly going in that kind of a dark place, you really start questioning it. But, in 2008, there were no books about hypothyroidism. There was only one. I take it back. There was one book, which I get express shipped to China because that's where I lived at that point. And, just to find out that I should stop eating soy and bok choy. That's all I got from that book, right? But I started looking at autoimmunity, and it was pretty clear to me that my own body is attacking its organs. And that's just conceptually, I didn't know really what it meant, but conceptually that just sounded really sick and wrong. And this is when I decided I was very intentional in, from that point on, where I decided to quit my job, give notice in, move to the United States, gone to the nutrition school and set up my practice soon after that. So, never looked back. So fast forward, I've been doing this for a decade now as a nutritional practitioner and specializing in hormones. And, today as a 45-year-old woman, I feel better than when I felt when I was 25 with constant migraines and being bloated and PMSs from hell and, tired all the time. And today as a 45-year-old woman, I just can't tell you what a profound difference it was. And I attribute, I would say 70% of my healing to dietary changes.
And what you're getting at is so important on a lot of levels. That first of all, the idea that none of the systems in our bodies stay contained to just that system, that what we take in to our bodies in terms of food, we're taking something foreign to the body, we're turning it into self through this metabolic process. And so the fuel of how we're fueling our bodies, makes a massive difference. But whether or not we can process it, whether or not our gut ecosystem is set up for us to actually be nourished by what we're putting in, and also the conditions, sounds like certainly with being in a different time zone all the time, that you had a lot of factors that were conflating towards why hormones went wildly out of balance in a lot of ways. And thinking about that maybe we're not all in a position where we can quit our jobs tomorrow, but we can certainly upgrade our diets, right? Or if we do have to be on a plane or working long hours or working with a lot of stress, any of which can be disruptive to the hormonal picture, that food can be kind of a stabilizing force in that process. I'm curious, first of all, what hormones you're talking about in your books, Cooking for Hormone Balance, and in your work. A lot of people think hormones are something that just women have, or obviously not, but but we think about hormone balance and people have some sort of vague sense of what it means when they're out of balance. But could you walk us through kind of the endocrine system in its interrelationship and kind of which hormones we should be thinking about?
So to answer your first part of the question about which hormone imbalances I cover in the cookbook, and by the way, it's a protocol cookbook, so it's a cookbook and a health book as well. The first half of the book is actually really setting the ground on the connection between food and hormones and what does it mean, which hormonal imbalance do you have, and just, I think most of my readers are very similar to your listeners that are educated and truly curious women, right? Who want to know, if I'm, if we're saying this in a recipe, I want to know why is that food in that recipe, because if I know the why, then it's more likely I'm going to make it a big intention to incorporate it. So I cover thyroid and Hashimotos. I cover adrenal fatigue. So both high adrenals and low adrenals, menopause and perimenopause, so low estrogen. I also cover estrogen dominance, as well as PCOS, which is insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes, and high testosterone in that category.
That is really thorough. That's awesome. I can't wait.
And let me also step back. Actually, one of the concepts that I use is that, how I said earlier, that before hormones go out of whack, there's something else that's typically going on that goes out of balance, right, first, and that pulls the hormones down. So what I have found in my practice is that, as much as we like to focus on okay, if I have adrenal fatigue, what are the 3 herbs that I can do, right? If I have, hot flashes, what are the 3 things what I can do? And what I have found early in my practice is that it's a very short-term approach. It often works 3 months, 6 months, and it stops working or not. It doesn't work at all. And then sometimes it gives you a paradoxical response, as in it gets worse. And what I have found is that there are 3 bodily systems that really govern good hormonal balance. And I use the analogy of a 3-legged stool. If you want to sit comfortably on a 3-legged stool, which is the one that I'm sitting on right now, all the 3 legs need to be firmly in place, right? One of them is shorter, one is missing, you're going to wobble or fall. And translate that to hormonal balance in our body systems, these 3 bodily systems I cover extensively in the book is the health of your digestion, is sugar balance, and the liver's ability to detoxify. So it's basically gut, sugar, liver, right?
Yeah.
And so you know how you talked about how which hormone pulls which one down. I look at it a little bit differently. I look at it from rebalance your digestion, as in get rid of the inflammatory foods, bring in the foods that are truly healing for your digestion, right? Your body loves. That's going to be one big part that's going to help to regulate so many different hormones. For example, your estrogen is going to get rebalanced. Women tell me their hot flashes start disappearing when they go on the elimination diet to take care of their gut. Women with sugar issues, right, have a lot less cravings when they do the elimination diet, take care of the gut. Second one, but sugar balance, right? Hugely important. Again, somebody has got PCOS. It's a metabolic disorder where you have too much testosterone because of sugar imbalances. Take care of your sugar balance. That's that's your foundation of your hormonal balance. It's not that we get questions like, I have too much testosterone. What's the one or two foods that I can add to reduce my testosterone? There is no such thing.
Right.
You've got to bring down your blood sugar levels, and that is going to take care of that.
And what you're talking about, sorry to cut you off there. I definitely want to get back to what you're saying, but just that model of the X for Y, right? If I have this condition, what is the magic bullet, or what are the three things that I need to be doing in order to make this, to move the needle on this level? But when we're talking about the endocrine system, everything affects everything. And the endocrine system, also is nested within the context, as you're talking about, blood sugar balance, gut health, and liver function, our ability to detoxify. And so really, and to that, I would personally add our relationship with stress, which in Chinese medicine has everything to do with our liver function. It's the capital L liver is the free and easy wanderer that allows us to have a healthy relationship with our lives moment to moment. And so when our liver energy is stagnant, it can certainly impede the liver's ability to detoxify and vice versa. And so getting that in there, but just the idea that it's actually quite a masculine versus feminine way of looking at the body, right? That contextual versus the sort of if this is the cause, if this is the thing that's showing up on a lab test as being out of balance, then that's the thing to pay attention to. That's the nail to drive in so that everything's smooth, as opposed to broadening out and going, why is this out of balance? What's the context in which this hormone is coming out of balance? Because if we can address the context, it will come back into balance, and so will everything else, without that whack-a-mole scenario that you're describing, where you fix one thing and three other problems crop up somewhere else.
Yeah. It's hard to think otherwise, because we all most of us, you grew up in the Western medicine world, right? Where you go and see your practitioner, your GP, and you don't want to get pregnant, there is a pill. You've got a headache, there is a pill. You can't sleep, there is a pill. So, we were conditioned this way, right? In some ways, it's almost like a Maslow's response to a condition. So suddenly to start thinking differently, nobody should be beating themselves up for not being intuitively thinking that way. But if you can just trust the process of people like us who've helped so many thousands of women rebalance their health in general, right? Then I know it's a reframe, it's a different way of looking at things, but even with things like herbs or pills, or supplements, it's the same mentality, like what you're talking about is, well, I've got PCOS and I've got these cysts on my ovaries, right? What's the one herb that I can add in? But while you're binging on sugar, right, you're highly inflamed, you're doing birth control pills that are just creating such havoc in your body. That one herb that somebody has given you might work for 3 months, but then guess what? You're gonna end up with diabetes, if the things don't change, right? So this is where really the foundation, I would say a third of the book really is dedicated towards laying the foundation. It's a little bit like, we're going to spring now, we are in spring. It's a little bit like, think of it as, for those of you who are gardening or have any inclination towards it, it's like you want to prepare the soil, right? The better you prepare your soil, it's not about where the seedlings are coming from and where the seeds are, organic or not, sure, it helps, right? But it really is all about the soil. That's going to dictate how beautiful and how the bountiful you're going to be collecting. And so think of that foundation I talked about, gut, sugar, liver health, is exactly the same way as your soil for the bounty.
Beautifully put. In a culture that glorifies busyness, it's easy to overextend ourselves, making the days longer by making the nights shorter, working through lunch, blowing off exercise, beating ourselves up for not meeting our own impossibly high standards. It can be really easy not to notice that comfort behaviors like numbing out with Netflix and a bag of chips have become regular substitutes for feeling connected to ourselves, loved ones, our intuition, and creativity. Until you realize that you're not in the body that you want. You're not experiencing the joy that you want, but that you don't know quite how to break out of the cycle. It's time to put yourself at the top of your own to-do list and start embodying self-respect. What might that look like? You'd get enough rest. Eat, move, breathe, and connect in ways that honor your being, not just your doing. You'd set boundaries to have more time for what matters most. You'd feel less stressed, more calm and confident. You'd feel lighter and more comfortable in your body. And leading by example, you'd help everyone around you do the same. That's how we roll in my Level Up group. See, I believe that you have the right to take care of yourself, even before all the work is done, and that when you do, you get more done in less time and are able to show up for the people that you love with kindness and patience. I'm looking for 5 people who are ready to start practicing self-respect this September in the next round of Level Up. It's hard to go against the grain of an entire culture by yourself and way easier in community. If you're ready to start honoring your being, visit the Level Up page at brodywelch.com and schedule a discovery call with me. If it's a good fit, I'll invite you to join this life-changing community. That's Brody with an IE, Welch with a CH, and hop on my calendar. Now back to the show. So within this context of the fact that there are all these different things that can happen with hormones, and typically people have more than one hormone imbalance, correct? Yeah. Like that's something that we see all the time. So can that be overwhelming to people? Is there a suggested place to start?
That's such an important question, right? And I'm sorry if I'm sounding like a broken radio, but it goes back to what I said. And to me, the gut is the first starting point. I mean, have you met a patient, in your practice who has digestive issues and is feeling wonderful? Can stop seeing you, and while they're having and when I say digestive issues, I'm talking here about just so we all get on the same page. Things like being chronically constipated, having gas, bloating, acid reflux, burping, being gassy, right? Passing gas, having bad breath.
Being tired after eating, having brain fog, having, there's so many things. It's like where digestion, we don't talk about this stuff because it's not necessarily dinner table conversation, but really but beneath the surface, it's so common for people to have gut issues, and even more common to feel that shouldn't be the case. Well, everyone else seems to be able to eat all this stuff and they're fine. And I'm like, they're not fine. You just don't know that they're not fine because you're not listening to what's going on with them. And specifically with the connection with mental health, this is something that is near and dear to my heart, is that the gut-brain connection and just how much of depression and anxiety can be linked to inflammation in the gut. And that's something that I personally have experienced, and that it can be utterly miserable. And so many people don't even think that is not in the conscious awareness. And so it's just making that link really explicit and paying attention to the fact that could actually be the underlying cause of issues that are affecting our mood.
Brody, if that's okay with you, why don't we give an example of how the gut connects to hormones? Because maybe
absolutely, that's a great idea.
There might be a bit of a disconnect there. So, but I'm just going to pull out maybe just a couple of examples so that our listeners would appreciate it and see the benefits. So one of the examples would be, it helps tremendously with a condition called estrogen dominance. Estrogen dominance is a very, I think it's so underestimated in terms of what it is. And I feel like 70 to 80% of women at some point in their lives, maybe even more, suffer from that condition, yet most of them don't even know they have it. And they will manifest in form of anything benign from having maybe lumps on the boobs and having a thyroid nodule and having PMSs and water retention going on, or irregular periods, or maybe heavy periods, right? But also to more serious stuff, like majority of breast cancers are the estrogen receptor positive breast cancers are 80% of our breast cancers in the country, which 1 out of 7 women will get, right? Completely manageable, completely reversible. Fibrocystic breast, but also fibroids, endometriosis, which doctors so liberally remove our uteruses because of that. That's all due to estrogen dominance. And so I'm passionate about this because we could save so many women's breasts and uteruses and ovaries by just being aware of what the condition is. So guess what? Going back to digestion, with estrogen dominance, our gut and liver are the 2 predominant bodily systems that really govern this. And so how does the gut play into this? Well, guess what? There is a subset of bacteria in the gut, right? We all know about the good bacteria, the good bugs, right? That do all these amazing things, including mental health you talked about. But guess what? They have so many functions we are now discovering. One of which is they code for enzymes that break down the bad estrogens and then evacuate them out of the body. So in other words, what it means is that you have specific bacteria in the gut that actually prevent you from having estrogen dominance, because it's their job to break them down in a way that skews them towards the positive estrogens rather than the bad estrogens. Estrogens are not bad. I don't want to, one thing, I don't want to sound like I'm demonizing estrogens, because you and I would never function if we didn't have sufficient estrogens, right? That's what makes us a woman, gives us periods and, good quality, nice skin, all that stuff, right? But the question is how the body breaks down these estrogens, what we call to metabolites that happens in the gut and in the liver. And we break them down to metabolites that are highly protective, and they are the ones that are highly antagonistic, we call them, which also can be carcinogenic, right? So can be causing cancer growth, for example, any malignant tissue growth. Who would have thought that just incorporating things like probiotic or fermented, foods into your diet, taking care of your microbiome, microflora in the gut, can have a profound difference on like why you have lumps on your boobs, so thyroid nodules. That people don't connect that, but that's the benefit of it.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important for women who may not necessarily study endocrinology on a regular basis, that at the age of 35, our progesterone levels drop off pretty dramatically relative to estrogen. And so menopause we think of as like the decline in estrogen that happens, or the hormones in general, but especially estrogen, that happens usually around the age of 50. But at 35, there's this progesterone drops off at the same time as we're inundated in the environment with these xenoestrogens, like estrogen-like compounds that can get lodged in our bodies and take up our estrogen receptors from things like just pollution, from chemicals, from body products, from plastics, that we're exposed to that stuff all the time. And so it's really easy to develop when we think about why the rise in breast cancer, why are women's bodies at such risk these days. But, part of it is this natural thing where it's easy to have relative estrogen dominance relative to progesterone, but that also we're kind of we're battling it from the outside all the time. And so being able to empowering our liver and our gut bugs to get rid of the bad estrogens or the estrogens that we're done with so that we can make use of the yummy, wonderful estrogen that keeps us juicy, right? That's really the name of the game here. And so yes, so many things that developing that healthy gut flora and making sure that the liver is able to aid in detoxification, both really, really critical.
Yeah. When I was diagnosed with estrogen dominance, because I had lumps on my boobs and I didn't know what was going on, and I started losing hair, it wasn't because of the thyroid anymore. And I was like, what's going on? And started reading more about estrogen issues. And then I realized the liver is such an important organ that actually has specific pathways in the liver that will bind up those estrogens you talked about, the bad boys, right? And carry them out, because we literally are pooping them out. That's how how the body gets rid of them. When you have conventional medicine treatments on breast cancer or even prevention or management, no one ever talks about the health of the liver and how important it is to support it with specific nutrients, right? That can actually help to bind up those estrogens and carry them out. And they exist. And, I just did one food when I was diagnosed. I just did one thing, and that was flaxseed, ground flaxseed. I thought,
awesome.
I like to experiment on myself, right? So I thought, I'm just going to do one thing to support my liver that the sources that I found says that it binds up estrogen, it skews that balance towards the positive metabolites. And I thought, I'm not going to do anything else, because if I start doing a lot of other things to support my liver, then I'm not going to have, that one isolated factor here, right?
Right.
I'm going to be my own human experiment. And I did that for 2 months. I went back to retest, and guess what? It moved in a positive direction just by doing a couple of tablespoons of freshly ground flaxseed.
That was my next question, was your dosage there for using the flaxseed. And it's important to grind, as you said, ground flax, right? Because then we get, if we don't grind the flax seeds fresh, they can go rancid. And when we grind them, we make available that which would otherwise be sealed in this hard seed-like container. And so yeah, that's awesome. So a few months of adding that. How did you use it? Did you just add it to smoothies or salads or what? What?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Smoothies, salads, on top of soups, just, not cooked. So keeping them raw. So the lignans are the ones, like you said, what gets broken up. And that's what helps with the estrogens. And, sometimes if just in a glass of water, just to make sure that I got it. And it was nice. It was just a couple of months. That's all I did. And, not to mention that all my breast lumps disappeared. And my hair took a little bit longer to stabilize, because this is my Achilles heel, if you will, hair. It was a phenomenon. I mean, that's one of the reasons why flaxseed is such a big part of my cookbook, because who would have thought, right? Just 2 tablespoons a day, and you can address your PMSs and fibroids and, start shrinking and thyroid nodule disappearing potentially. Of course, you get much better results when you do it in conjunction with a few other things, not just because we don't want to be, again, substituting going like, oh, I'm doing flaxseed while I'm doing everything else, like eating sugar and being on birth control pills and using all these crappy skincare products, right? And I'm surprised it's not working.
Right. Because again, the flax seeds are not a magic bullet. We do need to pay attention to everything else. Are there favorite foods that rise to the top of your list of what we should be thinking about for balancing hormones?
So one of my the foods that are definitely top of the list are the cruciferous vegetables.
Yeah.
So cruciferous would be the brassica family of cabbage, different cabbage veggies that we have. Like, of course, cabbage and cauliflower and broccoli sprouts and kale and collard greens and arugula, which is my personal favorite. The reason why I love them is because A, they support the liver tremendously. B, they contain a substance called DIM, dialdodomethane, that a lot of women take in the form of a supplement, but here you have it in the form of food, which is also nice, is just to bring that in, and that binds up those negative estrogens we talked about. Not to mention the fact that they also a little bit on the bitter side. So anything bitter stimulates the liver, and that way we produce more bile. Bile binds up again a lot of the harmful hormones, but also, bile is so important in, if I can just I got off a podcast today that really kind of set me off in the wrong path, just about, when you listen more to the traditional medical stuff, and sometimes I do just because I want to know what's the latest stuff that's coming out.
Sure.
But it's also the thing about, that total ignorance of gallbladder and how important it really is, especially in women's health. We so liberally remove our gallbladders, right? Well, you've got gallstones, which, by the way, a lot of times gallstones can happen due to estrogen dominance. They tend to grow much quicker when we have estrogen dominance. Doctors so liberally remove our gallbladders without, saying, well, you don't really need it. Your life is going to be fine. And then 6 months later, women start having massive hormonal problems. 2 years later, start having issues with their breast and ovaries, right? Not connecting the dots that could have been due to gallbladder. So what's the big deal about it? Bile gets produced in the liver, but it's stored in the gallbladder, right? And it gets released when we eat something containing fat. And the importance of that is that, people who have no gallbladders and who do not supplement with ox biles, what they do is they just shy away from any kind of fatty, fatty as in oil containing foods, right? And guess what? Oil is the good cholesterol, the HDL cholesterol is necessary for us to produce all our steroid hormones, all your progesterone, cortisol, DHEA, testosterone, which no one can function without, gets produced only when you have sufficient, HDL cholesterol, right? And guess what? When women have no bile, they don't want to eat anything that contains oil because it makes them feel sick, right? They get nauseous, the food sits in the stomach forever. They just, they feel revolted by anything containing fat. That's really, really tragic.
I love that you brought that up because I have a personal connection with that, with exactly what you're talking about, in that I never had gallstones, I never had gravel, but I had a faulty gallbladder for about 20 years. And I was a vegetarian, for most of my life. I was growing up eating a pretty low fat diet. And then I went through menopause at 35, right? And I believe that, so now here I am at the age of 41 in my post-menopausal state, but taking Ox Bile with my meals, no longer a vegetarian, realizing that around the same time, my body started craving animal protein in a way that I couldn't have even imagined or fathomed earlier because, just that we need the fat for hormone balance, and prompting me to want to look deeper into what was going on with my liver maybe during those years such that it wasn't producing enough bile from my gallbladder to be doing its thing. I mean, I don't know that it was necessarily wholly diet, but I'm still trying to figure that out, as I still feel like there is some hormone, even though I don't have periods anymore, I definitely feel like my hormones go through cycles that I no longer have a visible relationship with. And so for myself personally, I'm really curious as to what advice do you have for me or anyone else post gallbladder or post menopause who might want to think about how we can support our livers, how we can support optimum, having enough estrogen to keep our hearts and our bones healthy throughout our lives, and to not get breast cancer and things like that.
Yeah, that's a good important question. So, first thing I will do is I would definitely recommend supplementing with Ox Bile.
Yep.
And that's a must. And I'm always surprised how many women, probably 90% of women I talk to who have their gallbladders removed have never been even told that that's an option.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that you can do. I really like adding, so that's the best we can do, right? Mm-hmm. And then supporting the liver, as you said, with all the things that I'm sure you teach about liver health. I like doing things like, having a couple of tablespoons of apple cider vinegar or lemon first thing in the morning or before meals to get the juices going, because that helps to break the food down a lot as well. And that helps with bile production within the liver, even if you don't have gallbladder. So you priming the digestion for receiving the food and breaking it down, including fats. One more thing I would say about that is just the gallbladder issue. And you asked the question about estrogens, and one of my favorite things to do is, especially when somebody's going through a low estrogen, right? Don't forget that even though your ovaries are maybe already in a dormant state, the adrenals are still actually come in, step in, and stop producing and continue producing estrogen, progesterone for women. So, if we support the adrenals a lot, then you're supported very well with estrogen throughout, so that things like cardiovascular diseases or osteoporosis, it's mitigated. On a food level, I go back to that flaxseed. Flaxseed also contains phytoestrogens, is a natural occurring estrogen, right? And as much as I rave about estrogen, I just want to do a little mention here that there is something we call a paradoxical response to a food, and that can happen with anything, and so with flaxseed, I found that maybe 1 out of 10 women, instead of feeling better on it, start actually having tender boobs and, goiters, and the thyroid swells up. And so it's some kind of a maybe allergic reaction to flaxseed, then stop taking it. But, the other 9 women out of 10 will benefit tremendously, including giving ourselves like a natural estrogen boost.
That's awesome. And when you mentioned the importance of the fact that the adrenals play this role post-menopause of supplying us with estrogen and progesterone, so it's really a cautionary tale in terms of making sure that you're having a relationship with stress in your life such that you're not taxing your adrenals all the time, so that they can really do their job of keeping your estrogen and progesterone sufficient as we age. And so I really see kind of the menopausal invitation is one of slowing down and really relaxing more, not having such a driving, striving relationship with life, which I've certainly been guilty of in the early part of my life, and which is currently my growing edge of like really stepping into not pushing my adrenals beyond the point of what my natural energy is capable of. And so being able to move through the world from a place of centered balance is really, in my opinion, the best thing that we can possibly do for the endocrine system as a whole, because the body's always going to prioritize escaping from danger, and which is what the adrenals are designed to have us do, is to get out of life-threatening situations and to allow our estrogen progesterone balance to be normal, to allow our thyroid and our parathyroid and our insulin and everything else that is affected by high cortisol, by the adrenals pumping out their hormones.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this has been a really informative conversation. Magdalena, I'm curious if you have a favorite hormone balancing recipe from your book.
It's a little bit like choosing your favorite child, right?
Aww.
I wouldn't say, all of them are, this is really food I eat on a daily basis. So it's not some, weird stuff that I've just picked up from anywhere. It's, but let me share with you maybe a recipe that has really made a profound difference in thousands of women's lives. I didn't actually realize how powerful it was going to be until a lot of women started eating them, because, the book is really like an outcome of years of my work, and I've done a lot of online courses with a lot of women. So the book is really the consolidation of all of that. It's called The Farmer's Wife's Breakfast. And what it is, it's a total reframe of breakfast, from taking us away from the muffins and cereals and, toasts, and even oatmeal for that matter, because we're putting a lot of fruit and maple syrup on top, right? If you think about it, it's all sugar and carbohydrates. And if you don't have any health issues, that might work. But for most women who are having hormonal problems, sugar is typically an issue, right? And so are adrenals. And so the Farmer's Wife's Breakfast was inspired by the fact that, I've lived in 7 different countries. I've traveled to over 40. And whenever I go to what we call developing countries, I hate that term, meaning countries that have not completely, destroyed their food system.
Right.
And they're still eating traditional diets, right? I'm an early riser. So, I get up early in the morning. I love to walk the city and see how the city wakes up, and obviously have breakfast. And whenever I go, whether it was Vietnam or China or Japan or even like Peru or Ethiopia, right? People do not eat sweet stuff for breakfast ever. It's always savory. And that was a big revelation for me. And then I started thinking, what if I start putting that into my programs and with experimenting with women? And so Farmer's Wife's Breakfast is exactly that. It's a savory kind of breakfast. So it's a bed of veggies, right? Of greens. And so that could be, my favorite will be arugula, just because I love it and it's a crucifer. So it helps your estrogen and liver. And then that's just drizzled with a little bit of olive oil and lemon juice, right? Toss that. And that's your bed, if you will. And what you're putting on top is a whole combination of things. A little bit of sauerkraut, because I love adding some good probiotics to our food, right? And then, some avocado. So we're having some good fats in it as well. I'm not vegetarian, so, and I don't really particularly promote that way of eating when somebody's got hormonal problems, is having some protein. So in that recipe in the book, I'm using lamb patties that also contain things like cumin and phenols that are hugely beneficial for our digestion. And, pomegranates are in season, sprinkle that with some pomegranates, and of course, sprinkling that with ground flaxseed. So this kind of breakfast I've developed that into a template called the PFF kind of breakfast, protein, fat, and fiber rich breakfast. And when you have that kind of breakfast, it just sets you up for a total success for the day. Women have been reporting, the reason why this became so popular is because women have been reporting feeling so energized throughout the day. They've been having no sugar drops. Like a sugar breakfast, it just makes us brain dead 2 hours later, right? And then we go, well, now I need coffee to kind of wake me up and give me the agility again, right?
It's really different when we can burn fat as fuel and protein as fuel as opposed to burning sugar. We stay much more stable throughout the day.
So you got a lot more energy, no sugar cravings, no cravings at all. And in fact, one of the women who is in our community said, in order to change my nights, I had to change my breakfasts. And what she meant by that was that she got off sleeping pills. Because of the change in her breakfast, she basically stopped eating sugar throughout the day. She just didn't crave it anymore. And that allowed her to sleep better, which is, for us is nothing new when we listen to this, right? But, for someone who's been conditioned that she can only sleep with her sleeping pills, that was a revelation. And so that's something that I absolutely love, this kind of breakfast, because it just makes you feel so wonderful, and it's going to help you lose weight, get a lot more energy back, crave less caffeine, less sugar. So a total winner.
Cooking for Hormone Balance seems like it should have a place on so many shelves. I will definitely be recommending this book in my practice. Do you have any last words of advice or encouragement for our listeners today?
Yeah, our body is built to regulate itself and get us back into normal, into the best, right? And we just have to give it the best nutrition that we can possibly, and I know a lot of people listening to this probably go like, oh my God, now she's talking about, removing all my favorite muffin first thing in the morning and coffee, and how am I going to exist? But here's the thing. When you start feeling better, even with the smallest changes, we get addicted to feeling good. And, I will have a pancake once in a while, but then I don't really want it because then I'm brain dead at 11 o'clock. Why would I do that? So, we get addicted to eating well, and just give it a shot.
It's so true. It's then you look back at the thing you were doing before and it's just not nearly as appealing because you realize how different small changes over time can make you feel. Magdalena, thank you so much for your wisdom and your time today. I really appreciated talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Roddy.
This episode is brought to you by my Inner Alchemy retreat. Hey, what you doing next February? How about you and me and 20 others escape the dark, wet winter and go hang out on a quiet beach in Mexico for a whole week? I'm thinking a world-class retreat center with a 5-star restaurant serving us delicious prana-rich meals, luxury oceanfront bungalows, qigong on the beach. We could do some breathing and moving and some yoga, maybe some snorkeling and surfing, take a long walk at sunset. We'll pulsate between some deep relaxation and deep inquiry work, looking at ourselves through an elemental lens, how wood, fire, earth, metal, and water are at play in our lives, and grounding these concepts in our bodies. You'll emerge feeling renewed with an armload of new self-care tools and a jump start on who you're becoming in 2019. I've been leading transformational retreats since 2012, and they are powerful in addition to being a total blast. But don't take my word for it. Head over to the Mexico retreat page at brodywelch.com. That's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH, and read what past retreat peeps have said. Then sign up. You know you want to, and you deserve it. When you claim your spot by August 1st with the promo code PODCAST, you'll receive a free downloadable copy of my most popular meditations, Advice from Your Future Self, the Healthy Eating Meditation, and the Breathing Bundle. So head to brodywelch.com right now and check it out. Thanks for listening today. For more episodes of A Healthy Curiosity, you can visit the iTunes store. If you appreciated today's show, please leave us a review. This helps other people to find the podcast. You could also head to brodywelch.com, where you can find free self-care resources, learn more about Chinese medicine, and let me know what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, be good to yourself.